Welcome back. So this is series 2 in a line of series that's going to be about the clean architecture and building a web API, and also in the end having a front end communicate with that web API. What we did until now in the first series is we did full test-driven development and created the core area of this setup that I'm doing. And the core area in the clean architecture, more precise, the onion architecture I'm using, is kind of the center of our application. That's the thing that would never change in a perfect world, right? So we kind of set that up down here. Now you can check out the first series where we went and built all of this test-driven, by the way. But the new series right here, series 2, I'm going to focus on this area right here. I'm going to start implementing a repository. And just very briefly, let's just have an introduction to what we're actually doing. The idea was that a web API could call a create function in the service using an interface. Now that interface had an implementation. That implementation did a lot of validation, and that validation, if everything was good, then ended up in us calling a repository interface that just had an add function right now. Okay, and then what we are going to do in this series right here is we're going to implement that repository so it starts actually communicating with a database. So it's going to be with a DB context from a Microsoft setup, the NT Framework core, and we're going to try and get that up and running so we can actually start pushing some data into a database. And here's another way to look at the setup. In the end, we hope that we can call a create function to a service. That service can call a repository, and that repository can store data in a database. That's kind of the goal of everything, and maybe give a reply back. We haven't created that yet. We can go and create that later. And this is another way to show it with a flow diagram. So I expect that from the outside, somebody call create with a location on the location service that calls the iLocation repository with a location, and then it somehow goes and saves in the database. And that's what we need to figure out now. And again, I'm going to do it all test-driven. So hopefully you can get a good set of experience to kind of how you could do this test-driven if you wanted to with the database context and with the current setup that we have right here. So let's end it there. Let's actually next lesson dive into all of this and talk about the different projects and everything that I built to get started with the implementation part of the repositories inside the infrastructure of my clean architecture setup right here. See you next time. Have fun.